Janvala Girivaladhari Gopijanavala Girivaladhari Yashodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Shodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Niravanchari Niravanchari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya This is chapter 14. What page is that? 241. We can divide in sections. We can have 4 people and 3 people.
Lord Krishna, who knows everything, showed interest nonetheless in what Uddhava said about his kin's unhappiness. While staying home in Mathura with duties to address, within their hearts he showered love on Nanda and the rest. When Krishna first arrived in Mathura, he had made a vow to see Kubja, the humble hunchbacked lady, at her house. When she had offered sandal paste to Krishna selflessly, the Lord had promptly fixed her back. She now looked heavenly. Kubja had been consumed by lust for Krishna ever since, and Krishna did not wish to keep her waiting in suspense. Her home was furnished lavishly with paintings that could fan the flames of lust and turn to dust the vows of any man. When Krishna came, Kubja stood up and welcomed him with grace. With great respect, she led him to her finest sitting place. Uddhava too was shown a seat, but chose the floor instead, while Krishna chose an inner room and stretched out on a bed. Kubja prepared herself with water, oil, and fine perfume. She put on flowers, silks, and gems and entered Krishna's room. Because all this was new to her, Kubja could only stand, so Krishna pulled the bashful, lovely woman's bangled hands. The only trace of piety Kubja had ever shown was putting sandal paste on some young man she had never known. Today she sat beside this man ablaze with passion's fire, and Krishna, Lord of everything, fulfilled her heart's desire. The touch and lovely fragrance of Lord Krishna's lotus feet was all Kubja required to feel sated and complete. By holding Krishna to her heart, and she vanquished all distress. This former hunchback, now a beauty, said, I have one request. Beloved Krishna, stay with me for just a few more days, and I shall make you satisfied in all delightful ways. I waited all this time, and now my dreams are realized. How can I carry on without your smiling lotus eyes? Lord Krishna then assured Kubja that she would feel ever pleased. He showed her great respect, and with Uddhava took her leave. To meet with Krishna, Lord of Lords, is difficult to do, and if one does, mere sense pleasure is not the boon to choose.
A visit to Akrura, having
how many of you have heard of Kubja's pastime before? Yeah, this pastime. So yeah, it's really nice to have the commentary of Srila Prabhupada and the acharyas to understand pastimes like this, right? So in one way, it may come as like, why is Krishna going to visit a prostitute, right? And then two, he's going and then he's taking Uddhava with him, right? Like, what are the kind of the reasons behind it, right? So the couple things I wanted to mention here. So the one point is you can see how Krishna reciprocates with us on what our desires are, right? And so it's mentioned in Bhagavad Gita how we approach Krishna. Krishna reciprocates back, right? So in this pastime, Kubja, when Krishna enters Mathura, so Kubja is made servant of Kamsa, she sees the beauty of Lord Krishna and she applies the sandalwood on Krishna. And so that one service that she does, and then she is so she's so mesmerized by Krishna's beauty that actually after doing that, she was hunchbacked and Krishna straightened her, and she becomes really beautiful. Krishna, Kubja wants to enjoy Krishna for herself, right? So that's become her desire. And so Krishna reciprocates that by visiting her to her house later, because Krishna had promised her that, right? And so why do you think when Krishna is reciprocating with her, why Krishna takes Uddhava? Does anyone have any thoughts of why in the pastime Uddhava is going with Krishna? That's a good point. Where was Uddhava before this pastime? Where was what's going on with Uddhava? Came back from Vrindavan. Okay, why was he in Vrindavan? For message to? Right, to the gopis, right? And so when he comes back, he's just like so broken or disheartened, right? He like seeing the love of the gopis and seeing how they were just how they were doing without Krishna. He couldn't believe, like, why would Krishna not be there with the gopis, right? And so the reason Uddhava is here is Krishna tells Uddhava, right? Like he promised gopis that he's going to go back and see them, right? And so Krishna will fulfill that promise. And to show to Uddhava, right, he takes him to Kubja for this pastime, because showing that he's reciprocating with someone who served him with not even like completely pure desire, but he still reciprocated with him and fulfilled his promise, right? So what to speak of gopis who that's basically who just serve Krishna, purely, or that's their only desire in life is to serve Krishna, right? So how would he not fulfill his promise to go back and see the gopis? Right? So that's the Acharyas explain that's the reason that Krishna brings Kubja with him to show that, like he will to satisfy Uddhava, that he will go back and see the gopis. Any comments or questions on this before we move on?
Yeah, so I just have a question about the word prostitute, because so in kind of in the Western culture, the way that I've kind of like grown up and heard it, a prostitute is like someone, usually a woman, who is like, I will give you sex in exchange for money, and that's like a very business thing. Whereas like it seems like prostitute used in kind of the Vedic Srila Prabhupada way is just like generally any woman who has like illicit sex or like sex outside of marriage. So I was just wondering like what, because to me it seems weird to call Kubja a prostitute because she was like selling sandalwood paste, and she didn't seem to be someone who was just like that her way of living was like selling sex, So I was just wondering like what if she is called a prostitute in generally in the the Bhagavatam or the commentaries or anything, and just like what that definition is.
Okay. I think the word that was used at least in the Krishna book was society lady. Yeah, and I should have Googled it and see what the translation was. So I don't know. I'll have to look into it more. I'm not. Yeah, I should be more careful with choosing the words. So yeah, I'll take a look at it. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that.
Yeah, society ladies was like a whole different thing. Of course, so it was a little bit more sophisticated than just like, give me money and we'll have intercourse. And it was like serving another man. They come into their area, like actually they would cook for them. It's kind of like a wife, but they're not married. And then so it was a little bit more, in one sense, culture. So that's in a Vedic society, that's how prostitutes would actually function. They would like act like wives and do everything as a wife would, but they're actually not married. So that's one type of I'm gonna remember.
Communication.
Was that?
Communication stands for money.
Isn't the word courtesan? Whatever that is, was the courtesan. Classy, probably.
That's the only difference.
Yes, please.
I just have a question about the Latin verse 8. Kubja, it sounds like she wants to satisfy Krishna. She wants to give pleasure to Krishna, but then the last sentence of stanza 9 is mere sense pleasure is not the boon to choose. So I only know about this pastime from this book. So I feel like we talked about this in Bhakti Shastri class. So I feel like I'm missing some context here.
Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, what happens is at first when she's applying the sandal paste, she doesn't have that sense enjoyment desire with Krishna, and then Krishna from her not being a hatchback, Krishna makes her straight or makes her beautiful. And then when she becomes beautiful, then she gets the sense pleasure that like she wants to enjoy Krishna's beauty. And then during that process, her heart changes to then afterwards, now she actually wants to serve Krishna. Right? And then she says like, please stay. And then I want to satisfy you in all the right ways, right? And then, I mean, there are so many pastimes that we read in Bhagavatam that different devotees reach out to Krishna with different motives, but that's the beauty of bhakti, that it purifies us, right? And then towards the if we are sincere, then towards the I want to call like towards the end of bhakti, because again it is a never-ending process, but towards the later stages, it is that like our mood is to only serve Krishna, right? And that kind of changes as we progress. So right now it's like we may have ulterior motives sometimes when we're serving Krishna. And when I say ulterior motives, it's more like, we may still have some desires. It's not, our devotional service is not unalloyed or uninterrupted, or unmotivated. But the process of bhakti is so beautiful that it changes that. And then one thing when I was reading that, is sometimes like we have our service and we think like, we may get a little bit attached, right? Like, oh, like this is like my service and only kind of like I can do it, or like maybe get a little bit of an ego of like, see what I'm doing for Krishna. And so when I was reading this, like that Kubja is asking Krishna to stay with her, and then like she will satisfy him in all delightful ways. And so I was like, her mind is just like, oh, this is like, look at me, I'm so beautiful, I can do this or provide this service for Krishna. But Krishna has the gopis and all the other queens in Dwarka, right? So it's not like Krishna is just waiting on her for that service. So similarly, like if we kind of look at this pastime in that way, it's nice and humbling for us to remember that, it's not like Krishna has everything in the spiritual world, right? Like he's not really like waiting on like, oh, like if I will offer this flower in the morning, then Krishna's day will start, right? Or if I really chant Krishna's name and try to remember him, then his day will start, right? But he still reciprocates with the small ways that we can serve him, or we try to do that. So it's, to me, when I read that, it was really humbling to remember that sometimes I may see, oh, like this is like the service I'm doing for Krishna and only I can do it, kind of a thing. But we get so much kind of absorbed in that, in not the right way, that we miss that there are so many other devotees here and in spiritual world who are serving Krishna in so many magnificent ways. Let's move on.
Reunion with Akrura. A visit to Akrura having also been postponed, Uddhava, Balaram, and Krishna next went to his home. Akrura rose in ecstasy to see these honored guests and welcomed them exactly in accord with Vedic texts. Akrura bowed, embraced his guests, and took them to their seats. He gave them gems and other gifts and washed their lotus feet. He bowed down to the floor and sprinkled foot wash on his head. Massaging Krishna's feet in humble tones, Akrura said, "You've blessed us by destroying evil Kamsa and his men. You've vanquished all our misery. We're happy once again. Yes, everyone and everything is blessed by what you do, for nothing in the universe exists outside of you. You are the truth unparalleled in your whole creation. The wise can recognize your limitless incarnations. As earth and air appear in all forms of living creatures, you're one, and yet you have appeared in your countless features. You start the universe and bring it to its conclusion. Your tools, the modes, can never trap you in their illusions. Your body is your soul, you need no emancipation, and anyone who thinks you do lacks discrimination. You give the Vedas so the universe has direction. When atheists get in the way, you provide protection. You stopped these armies steeped in criminal inclinations and blessed our family with goodness and reputation. The gods, the forefathers, mankind, and the common creatures are worshipped when we worship you, universal teacher. Who else but you could be so powerful, kind, and pleasing? You give so fully of yourself, yet without decreasing. Your simple presence is a blessing that's so exclusive. The greatest gods and yogis find it remain elusive. Our friends and families and wealth give us no solutions. Please cut the ropes of our attachments to such illusions. Akrura's humble prayers always stood him in good stead. Delighted by his statements, Krishna smiled at him and said, Akrura, uncle, you're our guru. We are like your sons, dependent on your empathy, regardless of what comes. We pray to serve exalted souls like you in all we do. The gods are always selfish, unlike souls as pure as you. By sacred baths and pujas, one may gradually advance, but saints can purify a soul with just a single glance. Of all our friends and well-wishers, you're certainly the best. We pray now, dear Akrura, that you'll grant us one request. The Pandavas are dear to us and dear to you as well. Have they survived their father's death? Dear uncle, we can't tell. They've gone to Hastinapur under Dhritarashtra's care and live in mortal peril, though they've taken shelter there. The sons of Dhritarashtra used their father as a toy and easily could force abuse on Kunti and her boys. Please go and see the Pandavas, and if you recommend, we'll quickly make arrangements to protect our treasured friends. Akrura very happily took Krishna's words to heart. He called for his best chariot and ready to depart. Lord Krishna loves his devotees, as these two visits show. When Balaram and Uddhava, the Lord then went back home.
A secret mission. Akrura went to Hastinapur, site of Kuru's throne, where he had many loved ones and was very widely known. He greeted all respectfully and asked about their health, and they in turn asked him for news of family and self. For several months, he scrutinized the conduct of the king, whose wicked sons and poor advisors kept him on a string. Vidura told Akrura on the side, in great detail, how Dhritarashtra's sons tried killing Pandu's sons, but failed. He said, the sons of Pandu have extraordinary skill. The citizens adore them, but their cousins want them killed. Duryodhan gave them poison, though they managed to survive. Then Kunti came to see him. She disclosed with tearful eyes, my dear Akrura, gentle cousin, does the family in Mathura remember my 5 orphan sons and me? Do Krishna, my kind nephew, and his brother Balaram recall their aunts and cousins now that Pandu's dead and gone? My enemies surround me here as wolves surround a doe. Will Krishna come and speak to us so we may be consoled? Oh, Krishna, Krishna, our protector, can you hear my call? Govinda, our predicament has overwhelmed us all. For those alarmed by birth and death, what shelter is complete aside from that provided by your sacred lotus feet? I bow to you, the Lord of all, supremely pure and true. You know I need your shelter now, since all is known to you. As Kunti cried from yearning for her loved ones and her lord, Akrura and Vidura tried to offer her support. Remember, said Akrura, though you face depressing odds, your sons can well protect you, for they are the sons of gods. King Dhritarashtra loved his nasty sons to a degree that made him treat his brother's sons with crass inequity. Before he left, Akrura came to Dhritarashtra's court with these words from Lord Krishna, who awaited his report. Enhancer of the Kuru's fame, your state is widely known. Upon your brother's death, you have assumed the royal throne. By being noble, strong, and fair in everything you do, success, respect, and high regard will surely come to you. However, if you falter, who will ever wish you well? In this world, you'll be condemned, and then you'll enter hell. Be equal, prudent king. Thus far, the love that you have shown is skimpy for your brother's sons and wasted on your own. In this world, who can stay involved with any wife or son? Our bond with our own body will itself soon be undone. Alone the soul must take its birth. Alone, again, it dies. Alone, it takes its karma, be it punishment or prize. Dependents take away whatever wealth a man might hold, as offspring from a fish drink up the water in its bowl. A fool performs 1,000 sins to keep his children fed. His children keep the food, and he the sins when he is dead. Abandoned, blind, and ignorant, the fool who fails his soul discovers that his loved ones failed to pay his karmic toll. To understand your life is but a dream that's bound to cease will bolster your intelligence and bring you inner peace. Said Dhritarashtra, gracious soul, I fully understand. Your words to me are heaven's nectar for a common man. And yet my heart leans to my son, so everything you say remains like lightning in the clouds that flares but doesn't stay. Lord Krishna comes to bless the earth and ease this crushing weight. Who dares defy this dazzling soul whose energies create a universe complete with nature's full variety that we try to exploit while he observes us patiently? Akrura thought about King Dhritarashtra's baffled mood. He bows to God while clinging to a selfish attitude. Departing with permission from his relatives and peers, he brought news of the Pandavas to Krishna's waiting ears.
So now Krishna is sending Akrura to Hastinapur, right? So what has happened is King Pandu has passed away, and so just to kind of take a step back and give some background, how many of you here do not know the past name of Mahabharata and kind of what's going on with like Pandu and Dhritarashtra and the Pandavas? What happened was Pandu was the king, and he was ruling the throne. And after some time, he decided to go to the forest and kind of focus more on his spiritual life with his wives. And then at that time, Dhritarashtra overtook the throne, right? Dhritarashtra was blind, but he was the elder brother. So he always had this thing in his heart that, like, since he was the elder, he should have been the king. But because he was blind, he couldn't be the king, right? He wasn't fit to be the king because of that disability. So he always had that desire. So then what happened was, when Pandu left, he didn't have any kids. So when Duryodhana was born, that desire became even stronger. That, you know how a lot of times you'll see that the things that the parents are not able to do, they will have that desire, and when they have a kid, that desire will come stronger, like, hey, what I was not able to do, my son or my daughter will do that, right? And so a lot of the times the parents will project their kind of desires on the child, right? And so Dhritarashtra had that desire that Duryodhana will be the king. So during that time, Duryodhana was growing up, right, as with the idea that actually he will one day become the king, right? But what happened was, when so then Pandu passes away in the forest, and they have 5 kids, the 5 Pandavas. And when they come back to Hastinapur, where now Dhritarashtra is ruling, and Duryodhana has grown up being a brat who, you know, sees like it's basically going to be his kingdom to enjoy. So he has kind of grown up with that mentality. All of a sudden now he feels really threatened, right? One, because Pandavas have come back, and, you know, so one, because of with Pandu being the king and his son Yudhishthira, his oldest son, will take the throne. So now he's like, oh, will I really get the throne? And then two, Pandavas were always so skillful and so lovable that everyone around them was now, you know, the in the kingdom was loving Pandavas more. So Duryodhana even felt more threatened, right? So and then we hear there was like multiple times that Duryodhana tries to kill the Pandavas. Right? And so Krishna sends Akrura to go check on them, right? Queen Kunti, who's Krishna's aunt, and Pandavas are Krishna's cousins, and his devotees. So this is, as it was saying, it's like another pastime, two pastimes where you see like how Krishna is actually always thinking of his devotees, right? And so there's such a beautiful pastimes to meditate on, right? Because sometimes when we are in this material world, because of all the things around us, it can sometimes feels like, oh, like what am I like? What Krishna is like? Is Krishna really like? Does Krishna really have a relationship with me, or like does Krishna really think of me? Or and it's not like kind of in the mood of what we see here with Queen Kunti, right? Like she's actually really offering these prayers to Krishna, but we may think in the mood of like of anger or disheartedness, which is not, you know, kind of like a spiritual separation, right? And it's more kind of on the material platform. So it's good to see that, like, just kind of in those moments to meditate on these pastimes, right? So everyone in this room will go through certain challenges, right? Like that's just the part of the material world, right? Like that's guaranteed. And so when that happens, it's really nice to have like certain jewels in our pocket that we can kind of pull out and meditate on, right? And different, since we all have different nature, we get motivated or we get strength through different things. But whenever that happens, right, like whether that may be like sometimes we just like take the darshan of the deities and it just feels like, oh, like it was really special. I could feel like Krishna's presence. Or sometimes it may happen during a kirtan that, you know, we hear that kirtan and that was just like really powerful. Like for that little moment, we could feel something special. We could feel Krishna's presence, right? Sometimes it's like reading the scriptures, or sometimes, you know, the association of the devotees. So it's really, or reading pastimes like this. So it's really important to, when that happens, to kind of remember that and kind of store that jewel, because you would need that in the time when our strength is when things around in the material world are not really working, or we feel distressed. And so to kind of those pastimes and feeling Krishna's presence really help us. We can really take Krishna's shelter through those pastimes, right? And then so in here you see kind of Akrura going and meeting Kunti and the Pandavas, and he sees how Dhritarashtra is really partial towards his kids and the Pandavas, right? Because again, his desire is actually, no matter what he says on the outside or how he tries to be, but his desire really is that he wanted to be the king, and now his desire is that Duryodhana become the king. And so he's partial in that way. And then you see that when Akrura is telling him that you are actually just kind of wasting your life. You're the king. You, like, king's duty is to be righteous, right? To do the right thing, But here you're just basically are so absorbed with your love for your son, and then the love for throne, like what good it will do. So he's teaching him the message and telling him to do the right thing. But at the time, he's like, okay, like I understand it, but it's not sticking, you know, like I'm not ready for this. Right? And so it may happen, you know, a lot of us in our different ways try to share Krishna consciousness, right? A lot of us go and do book distribution. And sometimes it may feel really, you know, disheartening because the person is not really ready to take Krishna consciousness, right? And so we may feel disheartened in those efforts. But again, it's another pastime to look at and meditate on as we learn, like Dhritarashtra eventually, right? Finally, when all after the battle, when all the sons have been killed, Vidura will come back and preach to Dhritarashtra, and then at that time he takes on his spiritual life, right? So one is like not to get disheartened, because at some point you may certain soul is probably may not be ready to take up Krishna consciousness at that time, right? Like we do our effort, but that doesn't mean, and I'm talking more kind of in the in kind of a setting where you may not, you know, they're not in the ashram, where you know, like kind of in the book distribution and things where you kind of see them in like one time, or someone who just kind of comes to a program once in a while and you don't have much interaction, right? So it can be disheartening at times, like when someone is not really taking up Krishna consciousness, especially when you're not, you know, in your heart's like this is the best thing, like it doesn't make any sense. Why would you not do it, right? And so, but again, everyone is on their own journey, right? And we have our own path with Krishna. So in this case, like the Dhritarashtra is just like, he's just not ready to take it, right? Because again, he's just so absorbed in his love for his son, and he's just so blinded by the desire for him being the king, or his son becoming the king, that he's not really able to see that. And so also at times it can become, if we become like, our ego can come where sometimes if our ego is too big, we're not ready to take instructions from others, right? And that's another thing over here, right? So always to kind of keep a check on is like, is this like really my ego kind of blinding me, and to keep a check on it, right? Just even to be able to observe that and keep an eye on that, that's really helpful. So those were some of the thoughts that I wanted to share. Any questions or any thoughts in the room? Happy to hear what you kind of, what stuck out to you in the past times, or any questions you may have. Any of the chapter, yeah, please.
Thank you very much for class. I just want to go back to Kubja for a second, because it's a little bit mystifying to me. Like, it seems like, with the gopis, it's like Krishna is with them and has his pastimes with them, and then he's called away unexpectedly, and they're like, no, Krishna, you know, please stay with us. And he's like, no, I gotta go. And then he's like, you know, don't worry, my absence will bless you, because then that increases your love for me. And it's like, oh, you know, it's kind of, it's bittersweet, but it's kind of happy. But then with Kubja, it's like, why? It's kind of a similar setup, but it seems like the moral of the story is that Kubja is fallen, and not that, oh, Kubja was totally blessed by seeing Lord Krishna and, you know, and like interacting with him favorably, and then he leaves, and then she just like has this blessing where she gets to just think of him in separation, you know, like that's just like a much, it just seems strange to me, like why with the gopis, it's like, oh, this like love and separation, wonderful thing. When it's like Kubja, it's like, oh, he left because she was selfish, you know? So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I have learned in a lot of these pastimes, there's not like a moral per se, not like a specific message. That's the beauty of the pastimes, that you can focus at it through so many different lenses, and with the depending on kind of the lens that you're looking at the pastime at, it brings a different message, right? So like, for example, in this pastime, right, like one lens can be how practicing bhakti or even just doing a small service to Krishna purifies her, right? Because like her desire purifies through that process by being able to serve Krishna, right? And then two, it's not so much that there's nowhere, at least from what I read, where it says that Krishna left because she had that selfish desire, right? So if you kind of think of pastime of Prahlad Maharaj too, he gets the darshan of Vishnu, but then Vishnu leaves, right? So it's not like anywhere in the commentary we don't read that the Lord leaves because, you know, Prahlad Maharaj approached him in the beginning for selfish reasons. Or I'm sorry, Dhruva, thank you. That Dhruva Maharaj approached Krishna for selfish reasons, right? Like it's nowhere from what I can remember, it's mentioned, right? So it's not that Krishna left because of her having ulterior motives in the beginning, right? It's more to kind of that it purifies her. And then I think I would go back and kind of read more, but again, you can see that maybe that may be the reason too, right? Like Krishna left, and now she has gotten to that level where she wants to serve Krishna without any ulterior motives. So that would be like the best thing, is that meditation on Krishna in separation, right? So it's not most of the times there's not just one moral, and depending on the lens you look at the pastime at, it can give or focus on these different realizations, depending on one, which lens you're looking at, and then two, also where you are in your spiritual life. And that's the beauty of like the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam and all these sacred texts, that's why they're like ever fresh. Like you'll open them, and even if you have read this pastime before, depending on where you are in your spiritual life, you're like, oh, I actually never thought of it in that way. Or also like reading it with other Vaishnavas, like, oh, like I like kind of the perspective that you mentioned, I hadn't thought about it in that way. So it's not, I don't see there's like that specific one moral that, and two, definitely not, like I didn't see it to the point like, hey, Krishna leaves because like Kubja is selfish, and whereas the separation from gopis is to obviously that's more focused on with the gopis, because again, like those are the most exalted devotees, right? So the focus is kind of like because Krishna says, hey, how I can reciprocate, there's nothing I can give you that's higher than your love for me, right? Does that kind of addresses your...
Yeah, I guess the last line of the pastime kind of threw me out.
But yeah, I think the last line is kind of, hey, when you should know better now, right? Like if you have heard pastimes, like when, like what's, again, same with like Dhruv Maharaj, like when he sees the Lord, he's like, oh, like like there's a diamond in front of me and I was asking for broken glasses, like, you know, what a fool I had been. So it's like, you know, when you actually really get opportunity to see Krishna, like don't be a fool and asking for kind of, you know, self-pleasure. So yes, Prabhu, please.
Haribol, thank you for class, Prabhu. I was just thinking, Akrura was trying to speak wise words to Dhritarashtra, but it didn't really sink in. So, you know, it could be similar to us or to devotees around us. We have to be careful and not just rely too much on philosophy, because the philosophy will only work if
the soil is fertile. So we see sometimes devotees that are, you know, maybe generally it's a devotee that's relatively new, and they, you know, they really like the philosophy. They learn all the nice terms and they quote Sanskrit slokas and whatever, but you know, they're just not actually acting in a mature devotional way. Their interactions with other devotees are not so nice. So the philosophy should ideally should be a supplementary thing that aids in our bhakti, but if we should be well aware that, you know, we should also be humble and do other services, serve other devotees, and only then can the philosophy really penetrate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not, again, it's not, we cannot approach Krishna directly, right? So it's, we serve the devotees, and through that we can approach Krishna. So always kind of remembering that, and that will bring the humility. And I was when I was with Chaitanya Charan Prabhu for the last couple of days, he was talking to some devotee, and he said, yeah, there are so many ways to get egoistic, or like there's so many ways to, you know, kind of get like think too much of yourself. But knowledge, or the good knowledge of Shastra, is an express way to get that. Yeah, so always kind of remember that what's the point of reading the scriptures, right? It's not to quote the shlokas, it's not like showing, the light is never on us, right? The focus is Krishna. So, yes, thank you.
One thing that I took away from the Kubja pastime is how Krishna is independent. So he always comes and goes on his desire. And even if you have pure love for him, like the gopis did, he's never like captured in that sense that he's just going to stay with you forever. You know, he's always bigger than the devotee. So we see, like, even with Kunti and the Pandavas, you know, they're calling, you know, Krishna, when are you going to come back? When are you going to be here? I mean, their love for him is so wonderful. So it just seems like the devotee's position is always in that, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? I want you to be here. And he's got his mind on the Pandavas, right? He's aware of their situation. He's always thinking of them, and he comes periodically to bless them, take care of them, and so forth. But he never just stays, you know. He comes and then he goes, and he comes and he goes, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're in that subordinate position. So I like that. I like that aspect, that it's not static. It's never like we're going to reach a place where, okay, now I have Krishna forever and we're right here. He's always churning us. He's always moving. He's always, you know, we're chasing Krishna. That's our position.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. But then also, I think the whole point is the attachment to Krishna, right? So it was, and we see that in Prabhupada's pastime is his attachment to Krishna. That's really the essence of bhakti, is like how attached we are to Krishna. And so that's what we see with the gopis too, is the attachment to Krishna. Now again, like the physical appearance of Krishna, you know, may come and go, but as you're saying, right, like Krishna always has the devotees on the mind, right? And one way, when you were saying that, it kind of also, the thought that was coming to my mind is the same thing may happen with the spiritual master, or our relationship with spiritual master, right? We may have the physical association at times, and we may not have the physical association at times, right? But that's why, like, the focus is to serve the spiritual master, like focus more. Obviously the physical service is really nice, but then the focus should always be serving his Vani, right? Serving his instructions. And so if we can focus on that, then we can actually get more attached and serve the spiritual master in that way, right? So again, it's that again, some thoughts that came to my mind while you were saying that.
Attachment, he's churning our attachment.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
I was just reflecting on how, this chapter from Bhagavatam, chapter 48, it's called Krishna Pleases His Devotees. So, yeah, so we read two examples of how Krishna pleases his devotees, and one is Kubja and the other is, Kunti and the Pandavas. So it just goes to show that whoever's thinking about Krishna, Krishna's thinking about them, even if, their desires may not be absolutely pure, like in the case of Kubja. But actually, the Acharyas say that Kubja was a liberated soul, and that this was a pastime just to, for didactic purposes, just to teach us a lesson. And so it's not scandalous that Krishna's, having an interaction there with Kubja, because actually she's a pure liberated soul. But apparently it looks like she's this random lustful woman, right? Who just is really lusting after Krishna. And why should Krishna waste his time with someone like that when he has so many important, he has the gopis waiting for him in Vrindavan who love him with all their hearts, and he's going to spend time with this woman. So it just shows that even if we are not pure in heart, but if we are wanting to approach Krishna, we're wanting to have a relationship with him, we're attracted to Krishna, we're thinking about Krishna, then Krishna is thinking about us, and he will, be present in our lives in various ways, in reciprocation with our desire for that.
Statements that's here, Dhritarashtra is saying, I couldn't understand what he means. Who dares defy this dazzling soul whose energies create a universe complete with nature's full variety that we try to exploit while he observes us patiently? Yeah. What is he trying to say here? He first acknowledges Krishna, but then he says that it's okay for us to exploit.
It's one of the disturbance. Yeah, I think he's kind of stating the facts. Like Krishna is this dazzling soul whose energies create a universe, and people are trying to exploit material nature. So it's kind of it's just like it's puzzling. That's why it says Akrura thought about King Dhritarashtra's baffled mood. Like on the one hand, he understands the situation. On the other hand, he still loves his kids more, and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't be the person you want me to be.
So that we try to exploit, but that's what he's doing.
Yeah, so it's it's kind of the two birds, right? Like he's just saying, like we can just continue to have exploit the material world for our sense enjoyment, and Krishna kind of waits patiently, like, hey, whenever you're ready, like you can come. It's just not like so I think that's kind of what he's saying. It's like, even though sometimes it happens, right? Like whereas like you talk to certain people, and they'll make kind of like they know that they're not ready to Krishna conscious, ready to take Krishna conscious, and then they'll like also make some excellent smart statements like this, right? It's like it's like Prabhu, this is like too high a level thing. Like I know Krishna is God, but like I'm just this little guy, so I cannot take up Krishna conscious, right? Like some statements like that, right? So which is true, right? Like, hey, Prabhu, you're this little guy, but like you will always be the little guy, right? You gotta work on that relation, right? So I think that's kind of the way I see it. Is like the Dhritarashtra, since he's not ready, he's just like, yeah, like Akrura, like I know.
Also,
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic because he's like, who dares defy, but he's the one doing it.
Like he's recognizing his own foolishness.
He's trying to act like it's not. Like who's gonna do that?
Yeah.
Who do that? Like somebody does something and then they're like, why would I do that? When they did it, they're just trying to like.
In common to do that, like a couple chapters ago, I started ranting about why are you doing this? He's the one that gets those. And then somebody said these bodies together.
It's more like, I know what I have to do, but I can't do it.
He always like blamed Providence and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's Providence.
Yeah. It's yeah, Mahabharata is unique in that way because each character has their unique nature and it kind of shows. So, you know, yeah, Dhritarashtra has that nature. He's like attached and always, but he's never taking the responsibility. Right? And which is kind of showing like totally opposite of a king. He's just like putting it on others, or it's like, oh, you know, it was my fortune, I should have been king, like, you know, or what can I do? Duryodhana is his own being, you know, like, so yeah, rather than like disciplining him or things like that, he's just always he's never taking the responsibility.